what you can do with Python, and in particular we're going to look at a feature that's very useful in Python where we can add modules or libraries. Think of these like as add-ons to the basic Python tool set that you have. So you can add extra features, and you can also even use third-party features. So for example, in a later video we'll look at how we can use the GPIO library to access some of the hardware features in the Raspberry Pi. But for this introductory video, where we're going to first look at this idea of having this extensible model that's built into Python, we're going to look at a scenario where I'd like the program to actually pause or sleep for a certain period of time before it moves on to the next instruction. It's a very handy thing to do, and Python does support it, but it's not immediately available to you just by typing in the command in Python. It's actually in one of these extra libraries that you have to add to your project. If you want to know more about some of the libraries that are available for Python, a good place to go and have a look around is actually in the wikipython.org, and you'll see there's a whole stack of them there, some specific for certain platforms like Mac and Windows, some for specific purposes like if you're doing GIS and GPS type things, databases, cryptography, game development. There's a really good library for that. The list just goes on. And as I said, there's also all these third-party ones as well. The library that we're interested in is available to us as part of Python, and it's called the Time Library. And this gives you a whole heap of features like, working with Y2K, working out time zones and clocks, and all sorts of things, daylight saving time. So it's quite a useful library, and one of the features it has is sleep, which is what we want. So what I'm going to do now is start up our editor. We'll go into here, so File, New File, and what I'm going to use is time.sleep 5. So you can probably guess we're using the time library, the sleep function, which has a parameter or a value that you can pass to it, and I'm setting that to 5, which represents 5 seconds. Now let's just see how that goes when I try running that now. So I'll save my changes, and I might call this one time demo, and we're going to get this message back. Name error, name time is not defined. Now actually the code I wrote is perfectly okay. The problem was that I didn't tell Python that I needed to use the time library. So let's go back to our code view and see what I should have added before that line. And this will depend on how you want to do it. So we'll start with a simpler example of import and the library we want, which is time. Now, one interesting things about that is if I just type time and go dot, after a few moments, you'll see that the editor picks up all the available functions. Oops, sorry about that. We'll try that again. All the available functions inside the time library, and I can see them all there in that list. So the one I wanted was sleep. All I've added is the import time. Let's see what happens now when we run it. Well, it actually didn't give an error message that time, which is good, but it was a bit hard to see that it actually waited 5 seconds. If you're very careful, you would have noticed that it in fact did update there with an updated command prompt. But what I'm going to do to make it a bit easier for us to see is I'm going to use the print statement, which we've got pretty used to now. And I'm going to put print start, and then straight after the sleep is finished, I'll do another print, and we'll say finished. Okay, now it should be fairly easy for us to see what's going on, so we'll save that and run. There's start. A few seconds later, there's finished. And so we've successfully imported the time library, and then we've used one of its functions, sleep, and that works great. Now when you're looking at some of the examples that we're going to be doing for the Raspberry Pi, you'll see we've actually done a slight variation on that import, and there's a good reason for that. The Raspberry Pi, unlike my desktop computer here, or my laptop here, doesn't have a lot of RAM. It has about 512 megabytes, which isn't a lot. So if we import a whole heap of libraries like time, and maybe we're doing something with cryptography, databases, whatever it might be, we're going to start chewing up a fair bit of that memory for things that we may never actually use. For example, in the time library, the only feature I'm interested in this particular program is sleep. So we could do a variation of what I've just shown you there by saying from time import sleep. So what we've said there is go to the time library, but only bring back this one particular function we want, which is called sleep. So let's save our changes and run that and see what happens. And now we get time is not defined. This is a bit cryptic when you're first starting out to try and understand why would you be getting that. But if we go back to the code, hopefully we can make some sense of it. So remember before I had import time, and that seemed to work just great. So then I just went time.sleep. That's because there were multiple functions that are available in the time library, and I had imported the entire time library. This time I didn't want to do that. I only wanted to import one thing. So it didn't import the actual time library per se, it just imported the one feature which I wanted, which was sleep. So when I do things this way, I need to omit the time at the front and just simply say sleep, because that's the only thing that came in. Let's try it again. Save our changes and run it. And this time the program works the way I expect. So the only difference, again, just to recap, between importing, as I did originally, import time, and doing the second variation, which was from time import sleep, is that the second one only brings in that one function, the sleep function, out of the many that are available in the time library. And that's the way we do it with the Raspberry Pi, because it helps to conserve the amount of RAM that we're actually using up in our program, or to run our program. I hope you found that useful. We're going to be doing more with importing libraries when it comes to working with the Raspberry Pi hardware. But if you've got any of the functions that you're interested in, I suggest you go and have a browse of the python.org site. You'll find a ton of really interesting libraries there. Look at their wiki. If I just find that there we go. Have a look at their wiki for you, and you can see there's a whole heap of things you can do. Have a look at it and see what you find, and why not try one or two of them out and see what they do. Okay, so I hope you found that useful. Don't forget, if you want to know more about some of the different libraries that you can bring into your Python program, have a look at the wiki.python.org site, and you'll see a whole list of them there. And you can go through them, have a read about them, and why not try one or two of them out and see what they do. Everything you do when you're playing with the code and trying new ideas is helping you to learn. So I'd really encourage you to explore these features as much as you like and get as much value out of your time in front of your computer using Python.